Hi, welcome to Life on the X. I'm your host, Sal Cortez, and today we're excited to welcome Dr. Michael Guirguis, whose remarkable career bridges medicine, law enforcement, and executive protection. After graduating from UCLA, Dr. Guirguis earned his medical degree from Harvard Medical School before returning to California to complete his emergency medicine residency at Loma University Medical Center. His continued commitment to public service also led him to become a reserve deputy sheriff and physician assigned to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Air Rescue Helicopter Unit. Dr. Guirguis is also the founder and medical director of Raven Medical Security Group, providing global executive protection and specialized medical services. Today, we'll explore his extraordinary journey, some of the challenges he's faced along the way, and his thoughts on the emerging integration and importance of medicine in executive protection. We're glad you're joining us for this episode. And again, welcome to Life on the X. Hey, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Life on the X. And I'm excited to have with us today a guy, a physician who really has quite a remarkable background and career and still evolving career. Dr. Michael Guirguis from down in Southern California. Thank you for joining us, Mike.
Thank you, Sal, for having me.
I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I feel like you and I, in some ways, have crossed paths in things that we've done, and so this is going to be an interesting conversation. Certainly, you have a much more colorful and prosperous career in many things that you've done, and so we'll just get right to it. You are a Southern California native, is that correct?
Yeah, born and raised in L.A. Yep. Did some time in Lakewood. Yep.
And how did you, because at some point you ventured into medicine, but how did you end up, as I'm looking at your background, at Harvard?
Well, yeah, that's, so I didn't even want to do medicine throughout high school. I grew up in LA. I always wanted to be a pilot or a cop. Becoming a pilot was just kind of where I lived. So I lived right behind the Lakewood Sheriff Station, where they had Skynight, which was one of the first helicopter for sheriff's department. And, I used to watch a helicopter land 4 or 5 times a day, take off and land. So I always wanted to be a pilot, kind of growing up in my high school years. I played football in high school. And between being a pilot and a cop, I was like, oh, maybe I can go into the sheriff's academy or become a police officer, become a pilot, and, have a long career of just basically flying helicopters and get paid well. And, but I ended up having a football injury in high school, and it basically stopped me from, sports, and it stopped me from, there was no way I would be able to get through a sheriff's academy out of high school. So I ended up going to college, and, with my injury and kind of always being around doctors and physical therapists, I decided, hey, maybe I can do medicine. That seems like a good career. And I enjoyed it, the awe of, the white coat and, physicians and being respected, was cool for, a young 17, 18-year-old. So I ended up going to UCLA, for undergrad. I did a couple medical kind of summer programs, got more and more interested in medicine. And obviously I just applied myself. I applied to multiple schools. Harvard is one of them. Actually in med school, they want you to go out, before COVID, you actually had to go out and interview. So I flew out to Boston. I was like, oh, this is a pretty cool town. Had good interviews. And next thing you know, I was getting an acceptance letter, and I had to make a decision, but it was a pretty easy decision to make when, one of the top medical schools in the country wants you go. So I went, and, the rest is history. So.
Well, cool. I mean, like you said, that's a great school to go to, and really kind of a different culture, there in the New England area. I love Boston. I mean, I don't necessarily love it in the winter, but I mean, I love it in the fall for sure. Did you finished up your medical school training there? Did you do your residency there as well?
No, I actually came back to Southern California. So as much as Boston is a beautiful town, and I actually didn't mind the winters because I like the cold, and I had three pretty calm winters. And the last winter before I graduated in my fourth year, I ended up coming back to LA to do a bunch of um, uh, research and rotations here because I knew I was going to come back to Southern California. Prior to that, though, I actually had, my back progressively got worse through college and medical school. So in my third year of medical school, I ended up having back surgery, and that actually helped me. It helped me a lot. I mean, I walked out of the hospital within a couple days. Walked back to my dorms, which was maybe a quarter mile away, and it didn't take a cab back in the day. Um, and that was it. As time kind of went on, and I realized that my back was actually good now. Uh, through rehab and everything, I wanted to come back and do one, emergency medicine, and then two, there was a program out, where the old International School of Tactical Medicine was in Palm Springs. So I did my residency at Loma Linda, which is an hour away from Palm Springs, and they'd already had a working program with San Bernardino Sheriff's Air Rescue Program, and a lot of the ER residents were involved either as reserve deputies, but mostly civilian volunteers. And so I decided that I was going to probably pick Loma Linda. It was a 3-year emergency medicine program as my top choice. And I got lucky to be accepted into Loma Linda, knowing that I was probably going to have a high likelihood of being accepted there, kind of coming from, back east, Harvard, and doing well in my rotations in emergency medicine and getting some good letters from, attendings at USC. I did a month there, and the Brigham, Mass General Hospital. I ended up going through the Orange County Sheriff's Reserve Academy, in my fourth year of med school while I was doing research, going at nights and weekends. And so I ended up graduating in that same month that I started my internship. And, I ended up joining the San Bernardino Sheriff's Air Rescue Program along with doing my emergency medicine internship and residency. And I've been with the department ever since.
Wow. I mean, to use a Boston phrase, you must be both wicked determined and wicked smart, because that's a lot of stuff at one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, it's. I think that's just the type of guy I am. I wouldn't say I have ADHD, but I probably act like I have ADHD, and I enjoy just just doing new things, learning new things. I'm always trying to learn a new skill. Now the AI craze. I'm starting to learn AI, and it keeps your mind going, and it keeps it sharp, and yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Well, let me ask you, Mike, if you when you started your ER residency there at Loma Linda, and that's a level 1 trauma center, right?
It's a level 1. Yeah, at the time it was the only level 1 trauma center in all of San Bernardino County, which by landmass is the biggest county in the country.
Wow. So you got exposed to everything there. Did you? Because I imagine that your choice to get into emergency medicine was your first choice. Did it sink in and say, yeah, I chose the right thing? Once you started your residency.
Yeah, I mean, emergency medicine it was something I was interested in. I think a lot of it was at that time George Clooney, emergency ER was a big show. Actually, the writer, I believe in the Purdue. I don't know if he was writer and producer, but Neil Baer was actually a Harvard med graduate, actually. And so we would do bioethics courses based on those scenes in medical school. And I just got more and more excited about emergency medicine. And if I look back, I mean, it was a good career choice. It did kind of open up a lot of options for me in law enforcement and executive protection that I currently kind of do along with ER shifts. So it was a good choice for kind of, I think, my personality and how I like to perform medicine.
Well, it's funny, so many, I have several ER physician friends and associates who have found their way into law enforcement in some capacity. It seems like a trend. Do you see that as well?
I mean, I know there's a lot more out there than there was, 20 some odd years ago. But even when I kind of went in through the Reserve Academy, there was another physician that was an anesthesiologist down in Orange County that was doing it. But yeah, I mean, I see it as a trend. it's not a strong trend. I don't think. I mean, I don't think there's millions of guys out there, but there's a nice handful of folks probably in each region that are doing this reserve law
Yeah.
enforcement.
Well, I
You
mean,
know, and
even the founder of ISTM, you probably know, Lawrence High School, started off as an emergency room physician, I believe, down in Bakersfield or somewhere in Kern County, and ultimately ended up affiliating himself with the SWAT team down there, and then it's kind of blossomed into what ISTM eventually became. But I mean that's like 30 some odd years ago, and but it seems like if there's a specialty where you can really expand your knowledge and maybe even your career, emergency medicine seems like great springboard for it.
yeah, no, I actually, so I'm a graduate of ISTM. So I
Yeah.
went through, yeah, I went through the Palm Springs course with Dr. High School. Geez, I want to say in my third year residency, so probably in 2005 or so. So, it was a relatively, new school at the time. They had, I remember module A, module B. I remember going through and doing our, end of week session with the sim rounds through the an old abandoned
Yeah,
Palm Springs.
restaurant.
Um, it was a, it was no, it was more. It was a mall. I mean, it was an abandoned mall. So I mean, we didn't have just the restaurant. We had the whole mall. I mean, it was. We had a whole lot of room to play. So I mean, we had some good.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah, so we had some good courses there. So I'm sure by now that thing is built up and is probably hosting Rolex and who knows what else. High fashion stores there because Palm Springs has really exploded. But yeah, no, that was it was a great course, and it just kind of fit with what I was doing at the time with air rescue, and I did some time with the dive team as their doc, on board, and I did a little stint with SWAT, and SWAT wasn't feasible for me. I was, working. I was trying to make partner, in an emergency medicine group, and last minute call outs or not knowing when your shift was going to end. It just doesn't work for a young doc who's trying to get um, in a partnership role and trying to you know, uh, make money. You don't want to piss off your partners, not showing up to a shift.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, but with that said, you were still involved with San Bernardino, air operations, or however they refer to themselves. And so, um, tell me a little bit about your experiences there. And first off, are you still involved with that unit?
Yeah, so I'm still with the department. I'm no longer with the air medic. So, I started off my career as, an air medic. I'd worked with Dr. Jeff Grange, who was one of my attendings, who's, really big in EMS. He held a lot of knowledge in terms of EMS, working NASCAR and things like that. But he was also one of my mentors down in San Bernardino at Loma Linda. And I mean, I flew for 20 years up until about COVID, and we did everything. I mean, we did water rescue during, flooding during the, heavy rains. We would do medical rescues. We weren't really big into interfacility transports at the time. I know they started doing that recently.
Did they? Wow, that's
Yeah, I mean, so they're doing interfacility because now you've got all these code strokes and the STEMIs, and whatever chopper or resource they can use either by ground or by air. It's really big to get these folks out of a hospital who may be having a STEMI or stroke to a stroke or STEMI center. So if they have to use Sheriff Air or Reach or Mercy or whoever or Grand Transport, we were just kind of one more asset in that LEMSA's bag to move patients. That's something that they're doing now. But yeah, a lot of ours was just a lot of we have lots of mountains and deserts and Big Bear and San G and Mount Baldy kind of borders LA County and San Bernardino County. So we do a lot of rescues up there, hikers down, hikers lost, hikers just injured, couldn't get out, a lot of hoist rescues. I mean, I've done, I don't know, three,
too many to
four,
count.
500, yeah,
Yeah,
hoist rescues in my career.
Yeah.
We would do two full day shifts a month. So, I mean, I've got, I don't know, 500 flight days or so. No, probably 1,000 flight days now, just doing the math, under my belt. I mean, a lot of times you'd get nothing. And a lot of times you get 3, 4 back-to-back calls. All the traumas, all the people driving to Vegas, car accidents out there on the 40 or on the 15 that are, 2 hours by ground to a trauma center. We would go out there and pick them up and, treat and transport. So it was a blast. And then kind of COVID came around, and then with the height of COVID, I think a lot of the full timers, when we were really scared about what COVID was, were really, worried about docs and nurses flying with them, after us being exposed all the time in the emergency departments or whatever, part of the hospital they were working at the time. And we just kind of bowed out for a little bit. And then I think for me, after that, I've got 2 young kids at the time. I've had a couple run-ins with master switches going off or losing an engine, or actually we had one event when we were coming in to land for me so I could actually qualify at the range. I was just trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We ended up hitting an awning with our tail rotor and had to do an emergency landing. And I was like, enough. I'm good. 20 years on the bird. I'm good. I got little kids now that I have to worry about. So I'm done. So, I went
Yeah.
over to Aero Squadron for a bit, and, now I'm at the Medical Reserve Corps, which is a lot better with my schedule now.
It's funny you say that. I flew for 8 years for, the Highway Patrol. And I'll tell you that was kind of what signaled me out was just the number of, near misses. And I felt like I'd used all my 9 lives there. And,
Yeah.
when chip lights start going off and you've got to, take some emergency action. I certainly remember the last time well, it wasn't the last flight I had, but the one that said I'm done. We were long hauling a body recovery out of the North Fork of the American River. And I'm hanging over the side as we're bringing this thing up because we were using a long line, didn't have a hoist at that time on the ship. But right in the middle of it, as we're already lifting off and we're about 100 feet up off the ground, we get a chip light. We lose our number 1 hydraulic. So of course the plan, the emergency plan was to jettison the load and fly away to, the closest airport and get this thing checked. And, but thank God for redundancy. But I just remember, to some level of guilt, although I know, the person was already deceased, but I mean, we had to cut it free and head out there. And I thought, all right, I'm done. I mean, that plus, tinnitus and everything else, it was like, all right, I think I'm done now. But it's definitely, I wouldn't say I would have never done it. But sometimes I tell myself I'd never do it again.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that it's cool to say you did. I know that you were involved in an incident, the Christopher Donor incident there in Southern California. Were you attached to the helicopter at that time?
Yeah. So that was actually just, while that was all going on, that was just one of my scheduled flight days. And I just so happened to be on the ship that day. And actually that morning, this was after he had gone up to Big Bear, stolen a car, shot the Riverside police officers, days prior. And then they found a car up there that was burned that they felt was that car. And so they felt he was up there. So actually that morning when I showed up, I had no clue. I mean, I knew we were still searching, but I figured he was long gone by then. When, during our briefing, we were going to fly up to Riverside detectives, and they didn't want to drive up to Big Bear. So we decided that we were going to fly them up. So we were actually up there in Big Bear, dropping them off, having breakfast, thinking, okay, there'll be a couple hours. They'll take their pictures. They'll do what they need to do. And, we decided, they're taking too long. Let's go ahead and go back to the airport. Let's fly back down to the valley. We'll do some calls. They can just wait for us. And as we take off to Big Bear, that's kind of when he had carjacked a family that was in one of the houses out there, stole their car, and then that's when the kind of the chase was on. So we went from rescue kind of coverage to basically being surveillance and looking for him. And then that's kind of when he locked himself into the house, and all our deputies and law enforcement were up there searching, and that's when all the gunshots came out. And then of course, then the dreaded, officer down, officers shot, back to back. And I mean, that was it. We'd landed, kind of east of where the shooting was going. We don't fly with, plates. Um, we're kind of medical. And one of the Forest Service guys where we landed had actually come up in his truck, and he had some armor. So, we threw some plates on, and we started driving towards the active scene. And at that point, a couple of our SWAT guys, Danny Rosa and Larry Lopez, actually had pulled Jeremiah McKay, who actually ended up kind of dying. Probably was a very sudden death. And then Alex Collin, who was shot multiple times in the jaw, the leg, the chest, and the arm, and they were able to transport him out. We ended up meeting him at a LZ on the road, just south of the incident. And we were able to transport both Alex, and Alex was in bad shape. We actually just did another kind of debrief for San Bernardino just a couple weeks ago, about the incident, where Danny, Larry, and myself and Alex were there, and we gave, I think it lasted 2.5 hours. I mean, it's a long story, and it's an impressive story from Alex's recovery, what he went through, back to full duty, 8 months later, after, leg reconstruction, arm reconstruction, jaw reconstruction. So, I mean, that guy is a stud. I've done some talks with Alex in the past, some podcasts in the past. And, now he continues to teach every academy class, the will to survive, 3-4 times a year through each academy, and kind of his story, what he had to go through, how he pushed through, and how he's actively working now. I mean, he's a sergeant now, and, I mean, he's climbing the ranks and still in love with what he's doing. And I mean, that guy's a stud.
It's amazing how, especially in today's environment, at least from my perspective, no two people are alike, and their level of resilience and their will to survive and their will to to continue doing what they do is different from one person to the next. And when you speak of Alex and you speak of people like that, you know, any other scenario might have been, he was fortunate enough to survive, and it was just too much for him, and he's no longer working. What in your mind, and because you could probably see this in medicine as well, because there's a lot of things that occur, especially in an ER. Different people are wired differently. Do you see like the same types of personalities within law enforcement that you see in medicine?
I wouldn't say it's. I would say there's a few in emergency medicine that maybe have some overlay with law enforcement, but I think it's two different personalities. There's a lot of emergency medicine people I work with that, part of my French, have their head up their ass. They don't have any kind of situational awareness whatsoever. They look like a victim, they act like a victim. You see them with psych patients who are violent, just even the way they position themselves when they're interviewing a psych patient. I mean, they put themselves in a corner. I mean, you just look at them and go, geez, you're just lucky that nothing's happened to you. Not because you position yourself correctly, but because just nothing happened to you. That's it. Otherwise you'd be beaten, and it's insane. So yeah, I mean, if there was ever an active shooter, I mean, I don't even know if they would even be able to get themselves out of the situation. So yeah, I would say law enforcement, and emergency medicine, or maybe there's a Venn diagram where there's a little overlap between the two.
Yeah. Well, definitely there's in my experiences, it's just the ability to see trauma consistently, especially in an emergency room setting, and still be able to come back, especially even during the COVID era. I mean, whether you're working in an ER or you're an EMS and you're working on an ambulance, whether you're, a patrol officer to any level, there's just repeated trauma
Oh,
that
yeah.
is constantly hitting you that you don't even acknowledge. I mean, we all walk around with some level of PTSD, I guess, but yeah, it's a big deal. So hey, listen, to go back to the incident that day at Big Bear, in your capacity flying that day, do you guys operate in an ALS or BLS capacity when you're flying or otherwise?
Yeah. So when I'm flying, we're ALS. So, as long as we're a doc and an EMT, a nurse and an EMT, then we're ALS. Or two paramedics, we're ALS, unless rules have changed in the last 5 years. But most of the time, yeah, it was basically medical ALS capacity because a medical BLS helicopter is, I mean, there's not too many interventions other than just kind of get into a facility quicker that you're going to be able to do kind of as a BLS. So, but yeah, so when I flew it was ALS. I mean, we did everything. We had RSI, intubation. I've intubated. I've RSI'd. I've put in a needle, decompression. Even one patient, we put a central line because we had a long transport, which is nice and fun when you're doing it in a UH-1 Huey from the 60s.
Yeah, yeah,
That thing just rattles,
rattles. Yeah, it
it
does.
just rattles.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I've flown many tens of thousands of hours, at least 10,000 hours. And yeah, you see a lot, you do a lot, especially being the only level one trauma center, in the county. And which was nice because I trained at Loma Linda. I knew the folks there. It made just all transitions, all communications with the MICNs, en route to them. If I was busy, I didn't have to give the long formal, report. It was like, all right, it's Doc G. We're good. He's gonna let us know when he gets there. He's obviously busy and he doesn't have time to just sit and give a 5 minute report. So it did make my life a lot easier. But yeah, no, I mean, that was an experience of a lifetime. I mean, there's a difference between doing a ride along and kind of seeing what happens and then actually doing it. You do get a respect for kind of what our first responders that do this full time, EMTs and the medics. And so maybe when their charts aren't up to par, maybe like my emergency medicine chart's not up to par, or they show up without an IV. I've showed up without an IV many a times, and I've even gotten some flack for some nurses, some non Loma Linda nurses, about how I didn't get an IV in, like how dare you, shame on you. And you just look at them and laugh, and you're just like, well, sorry, I didn't have time, like a lot more going on.
yeah. Yeah, and although you've got that large space Huey, my biggest challenges were the space and just not having the physical dexterity to get into position. I mean, I was always happy when someone had started a line before I got there, but I mean, if I needed to start a line, and certainly, the couple times that I've passed an advanced airway was all well, either nasal because they were agonally breathing, and that was the only way that I could physically do it, or otherwise. And so it's definitely a juggling act, and I don't think people quite understand the restrictions of flight medicine
Yeah,
as
well,
well as they think they do.
yeah, I mean, just like CHP's bird, I mean, we didn't have a lot of space. I mean, we're set up almost like, I think you guys are flying A stars.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
we didn't have space like the UH-1 Hueys that you think. We didn't, because
Really?
basically behind us on each side we had all our hoist gear and our hoist on one side. Behind us on the other side, we had all our medical gear, oxygen, and everything else on the other side. Then we had a bench that we sat on, for two or three of us in the back. And then you had enough room for us Stokes. And even our monitor was pretty much on the control deck, sitting on their controls on the ground. So we literally had enough to just look down and see the patient. There was no
So
room like
so
these.
only capable of transporting one patient by and
we
large?
would we Well, we could do two patients, so we had a setup where we could stack two patients on top of each other, and we've done that multiple times. But that was even a setup. That was like, if we're going to transport two, we actually have to set it up. and we had basically the framework, to click into the helicopter on the floor and on the ceiling, and then we had like a cloth. It was almost like a cloth sheet that would attach to the poles, and we could put the stokes down below and then backboard on top, and that made it really fun.
That's very MacGyverish sounding.
Yeah.
Are they? Do you know? I'm sure you do. Are they using whole blood in San Bernardino?
I don't
The
know if they're
field?
using whole blood now. I've been kind of out of the medical in 5 years. I mean, I used to be involved in ISOMA, which is the local LEMSA, all the time. I was the med director for Confire, which is the EMS fire dispatch center for 10 years. So I would go to the ISOMA meetings all the time, either representing Confire or sheriffs, or kind of representing both since I was there. And at that time, there was no whole blood, but this is COVID time. But I know the last 5 years, whole blood has been, a real big thing. And then in San Bernardino County, for sure, it's something is necessary. The issue with whole blood is you need people to donate blood to give whole blood, and I'm in the ER under duress all the time, where we don't have enough blood. We need blood, or this patient needs to be, triple cross match because they've got all kinds of antibodies, and, we got to find the right blood for this patient because they're a chemo patient or a multiple transfusion patient for whatever medical reason. But I mean, I do. I see it all the time. I see it on LinkedIn. I see people talking about it on podcasts. I mean, it is life saving, but I think as much whole blood and EMS needs to be thrown out there, we need to talk about, we need whole blood to actually give whole blood. So we need to get people to go out there and start donating.
Yeah, no, that's true, and certainly there are some levels of restrictions even when you're taking it out in the field, and so it it has definite positives when you're using it, but like you said, the logistics of it can be a little overwhelming and maybe restrictive, and I can see it, trending up across each lemma, but very reluctantly more than anything else. But yeah, just again, one last touch on the Dorner case. Imagine, because when you look at the magnitude of that entire case and all the things that were involved and all the things that he did, you said the debrief to that must have been amazing. And how much of that were you able to attend and be involved in?
Other than the initial debrief the night of, when we
Mhm.
kind of got back to the airport and we had, food for us because we hadn't eaten since the morning, and, just a quick debrief, to be honest with you, at that time, I didn't want to hear any of it. I wanted to go home. I wanted to shower. I wanted to eat and just get out of there. And I never really attended any debrief. I didn't really talk about it much. When you mentioned PTSD with emergency medicine, I mean, I think in that sense, there is a lot. I mean, we do see in emergency medicine a lot of trauma, a lot of suffering, a lot of death. Easier maybe when someone's 90 and dies versus someone that's 2 years old. Just because, look, we're not God. This is just the reality of life is, we're getting older, and a 90-year-old, it's, they're meant to die. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's in the card, but a 2-year-old is just not meant to, pass away at 2 years old, or a newborn. So that hits you harder. But yeah, for me, it's like me talking about it more doesn't help me. I think over the years, and for the longest time, I would never say his name, and I still probably don't say his name. I don't even know if I've said it today. I'll let you say it. I don't mind. But for me, his name doesn't even. It's not worth even mentioning. So I think over time, and just seeing Alex's resilience, teaching this class, just being open about it, just kind of realizing, hey, something bad happened. He fought through it, and now this is going to be, lessons for other upcoming deputies or police officers to, kind of learn from his tragedy, or kind of, terrible thing that happened to him. I've just learned that, hey, listen, you know what? I mean, it is what it is. This is kind of what happened. I was involved. I'm glad I was there. Um, as a physician, they always ask me, "Hey, do you think he would have made it if?" I think it was in the cards for him to make it if it was me or a medic or another doc that was on or a nurse. But I think there was some things there that we did that maybe with my years in the emergency department and my training that I did that if I went through straight paramedic protocol, he would have been worse off. I won't kind of get into the details of what we did,
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, I think as a physician, I've got no LIMSA protocol or no fire agency protocol that I have to work under. I can do whatever the hell I want to do. And I did
Right.
whatever the hell I wanted to do because I had to. And I think he was better off for that. So that's
Totally.
what I'll say about
Completely
that. Yeah.
understand what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell you in my couple dozen years of EMS as a medic, you know, I might have done some things that never got documented that I felt like I
Yep.
had to do. That's
Yep.
just, you do what you have to do to get the outcome that you desire. And easy enough for me to talk about it today, though, more than back then. Um, so with all the stuff that you have done, and at some point here, you made this transition into what has become kind of a I don't want to say popular, but an emerging field in not just executive protection, but the facilitation of medicine within the realm of executive protection. How'd you get involved in that?
Yeah. So it was right around COVID time. So it was like in 2020. And I work with a PA buddy of mine who's an ortho PA, and he knew an 18 Delta who was working for a high net worth client up in Silicon Valley. And he had obviously, we talked. He actually just finished LAPD Reserve Academy now. I mean, he's probably in his 40s, always wanted to do it, and he actually had the time and the ability to do it. And he is trained with SWAT and a lot of LAPD units. So he just finished. But back in the day, he'd always been intrigued kind of with my sheriff air rescue and obviously working in the ER. And I've consulted him a lot in terms of orthopedics. And one day he just comes up to me. He goes, "Hey, I've got a buddy of mine that they're doing executive protection." And I'm like, "I don't even know what that is. Like, what is executive protection?" So I learned by fire, and they needed a medical director up north for a high net worth client who had Air Force PJ, paramedics, and other medical assets there. And they wanted to build up a medical program. So I flew up there. I talked to the chief security officer, talked to the folks there. I met, the 18 Delta who, kind of introduced me to the group. And yeah, I became medical director for them. And then just as my time with them, I started learning more about executive protection, what they do, residential security teams, overprotection teams when a client is moving, covert protection or known as Cove Pro, where a client may not be as visible to the public. You wouldn't know who they were because they're, a tech person. They're not your typical Hollywood bodyguard type thing. And so as I kind of learned all this and the training, and we just started training our PJs are well trained medics. They're all special forces medics. So they were always a great asset to have. I just started getting to know people in the industry. And then I kind of made a name for myself in that small group. In executive protection, you can have a LinkedIn resume, but if people don't know you, they're not gonna hit you up. If they can't trust you, they're not gonna reach out to you. So a lot of it has been word of mouth. And the business has grown. I still do emergency medicine. I've cut back on my hours a lot to about 2 shifts a week, which is the minimum of kind of what I want to do, just to kind of keep my skills up. Because my fear is a lot of these folks that are working on these executive protection teams, if they're not riding a rig or kind of keeping their skills up after 6 months, a year, you start to lose some skill set. These are all perishable skills. So that's why we train so much. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of everything's expanded. I mean, I do events, Vanity Fair. I do work for Apple. I'm the med director for Chipotle's Global Protective Services. Work with a great team there. Um, But yeah, and it's, I just finished Comic-Con for a production company. I won't mention who, but I worked for a production company, a streaming service, and, basically was, with a couple of the shows and the cast doing press while at Comic-Con. So, yeah, I mean, I keep myself busy. I love it. I think the teams that, I embed in, kind of love having me there with my skill set. So it's been a journey, and, I've still got some years left on me. So I continue to ramp up, as I kind of ramp down my shifts.
But as a medical director, working for any of these entities, are you a boots on the ground guy, or are you providing a combination of training and oversight, program development, et cetera?
So it depends on the organization. So a lot of times I'm med director. So I work with a group out of Florida called XPJ. They're all retired or reservist Air Force pararescue men. They do embed, and we contract a lot with third party security teams or corporations, and we'll embed our folks with their, full-time security teams to kind of provide that medical coverage. So a lot of times for that, I'm just basically med direction, but there's a lot of times where I'll do movie premieres. We've done conferences in Vegas where I've actually been there with, 3 other PJs to support a corporate team. They've had 5,000 employees, at a conference, corporate conference where they're talking about new upcoming products and what have you. And they've had concerts, and, we provide coverage for the C-suite folks, but also for, all those attendees and employees, along with venue security, obviously, and venue medical. But yeah, I mean, I just did 4 days of boots on the ground down in San Diego, working, and it was a good trip. Worked with a lot of great folks.
And when you mention this group in Florida, it sounds like they exclusively work on the medical side of whatever EP organization that they are working with or for. the ISTM trains EP training and mixes in just basically medicine along with it. But where we find the biggest problem is that if you don't train the people who are doing some level of protection, you get a big drop off there in terms of providing good solid TECC medicine. Does in your position, do you also provide training to the actual EP people?
So that's based on the corporate. So the PJs in Florida, the corporations built in Florida, but they've got PJs who live all over the country. So that does give us some flexibility in terms of, if it's a California company, we've got California, PJs that are living in SoCal or NorCal. So we're able to use those folks, because a lot of this time, I mean, there's cost not only of the agent working, but also the cost of flying and putting them in a hotel. So, that starts to get expensive in terms of the training. So yeah, we do TECC training. I mean, it's hard, right? Because TECC training is basically a trauma training, but a lot of times we're requested not for the trauma, we're requested for the medical aspect. And it's really hard to teach a non-medical EP agent or professional the medical side, like asthma, or, what do you do for chest pain? What do you do for belly pain? What are the questions you ask? What are you worried about? It's impossible to teach that unless you've actually had formal training. And I've had a lot of folks go through EMT training, but we've actually set up now, ride outs where they can actually ride out with ambulance services in the area. So they can actually get like hands on. This is what we do. This is how you do it. Even if they're not doing the hands on, they could see, an evaluation, what the EMT or medic is thinking when they're coming on, into a house, or, coming up on a car that's maybe been in a car accident, how they're doing that evaluation. Because, like, and it's not that I'm talking bad about EMS training or paramedic training. I got out of medical school after 4 years of medical school and didn't know anything. I mean, obviously I knew medical, but I didn't really know. Like in your 30-year rotations, when you're coming in and seeing a patient, you always have someone to run it off of. They're going to, yeah, you did this right. You did this right. You should have been looking at this. But I got thrown into the fire my internship year. Like, you're on your own and you have to learn by fire, and you learn by fire. But it's because I had 3 years of residency of actually doing it, basically being a doctor, that I actually learned emergency medicine. It wasn't from medical school. So this is what I think we're missing with the folks that are going into EMT school, is they're not riding a rig for a year or 2 years because they're embedded in an EP team and they're getting this EMT training to be an EMT, but they're not really, they're an EMT by certification only, but they
Correct.
just don't have that true EMT skills. So that's what we
That's
try to
correct.
integrate, is make them do, the ambulance ride outs, or, shadow a physician in a hospital, or do something where they're actually just kind of learning more as they're going, as they're working as an EP professional.
I 100% agree with you, and throughout my experiences with people, and I deal mostly with law enforcement. So as you go through an academy, and I think you take a 21-hour. I think it's LD 34. The Learning Domain 34, and it's topical medicine and trauma medicine, etc. Um, and it's by and large in one ear and out the other, because when you leave that academy, your biggest concern is passing FTO, and they're not
Right.
grading you on your medical capability.
Right.
They're on everything else, and so it is a perishable skill. But if for whatever reasons, whether you've been certified as an EMT or a public safety first responder, that's just a title, unless you have something to back it up with, and there's no substitute for experience and observation combination. And where we see most of the problems in the training that we do, and I agree with you also 100%, because in my experiences in EP, working pretty much as the medic for two different governors, is that I don't say I wasn't concerned about the potential of a traumatic event. I was more concerned about a medical event,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding, well, first off, from the political perspective, they don't like to give up any of their information. And so I had to kind of secret squirrel find out exactly what their histories were, so that I could better understand, prepare, and then prepare the team, in the same understanding, because there were a couple medics on the team. But I think it's so important, and I think you touched on it, is that that EP personnel understand what is more likely to occur, a medical condition,
Mm-hmm.
than anything else, and that they at least know what to look for, and maybe not be capable of treating so much, but at least knowing I've got to sound the alarm to it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what we train for on the medical, right? Is 10-year-old having chest pain is different than a 60-year-old having chest pain, is different than a 50-year-old with history having chest pain. And that can't be something that you allow just to, okay, we'll check on you in a little bit. I mean, that needs attention then and there. It's tough. I mean, it really is tough, because we're asking a lot for an executive protection professional who's not medically trained to kind of be a medic, and it's not adequate. And that's where XPJ comes in, or where, like, if you don't need a full-time medical guy, then at least have them for high risk trips, or trips where family may be involved, kids may be involved, and then having a medical asset there uh, is prudent. And like you said, I mean, politicians don't want to give up medical history unless it's public knowledge because of an incident in the past. But same as these executives, they don't want to give it up, because a lot of time that's their power, is maybe having other folks not know what they're dealing with when they're negotiating or what have you. I've seen that the executives that I work with are more apt to tell about family, because they want their family to be taken care of if they're going on a trip with them. So if their kid has asthma or a peanut allergy or anything like that, that doesn't affect them, and they're looking out for. But there is a lot of stoicism. You get a CEO who's got $1 billion company they're running or sold $1 billion company. They don't want to think about their, it's funny because when you have a doctor around or when you have a medic around, it's a reminder of like, hey, listen, I'm human. Something bad can happen to me, and they don't want to be reminded of that. And I think that's also a lot of the hesitation having medical folks around, is because it's like, you don't want to see a doctor unless it's a general checkup, or you need to see a doctor, but you don't want to be reminded that that you're human, and that there's a possibility of bad things happening to you, or medical things happening to you, or traumatic things happening to you.
Yeah. I mean, all these things are
It's
seen as vulnerabilities toward a principal, but you've got to measure whatever issues they may have with your ability to be able to treat them as required, and that's a problem sometimes, for sure. You are the founder and medical director of Raven Medical Support Group. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's the company I started kind of when I got into executive protection, 5 years ago.
So, I mean, is that the primary function of your group?
Yeah, the primary function is for medical direction and training. Um, I only do training for groups where I come on as a medical director. If someone wants TCCC or TECC, I mean, you've got groups like yourself. There's other groups out there that will do it. Um, that's not my bread and butter, unless I'm actually going to train and continue to train kind of those perishable skills over time. I know XPJ will do TECC and TCCC training also for corporations, and I leave that up to those guys, and I'll oversee those programs. But for myself, I keep the training that I do towards the companies that I'm actually working with.
Yeah. Well, that's and are there other companies like yours that are in this type of business that you're aware of?
There's
A
a
lot.
few other companies that, a lot of them are up in Silicon Valley. I know of two or three other ones that kind of do similar, but they also go into the executive protection space. So they're also hiring. I have no business. I mean, I've got a guard card, so I do operations myself. With the law enforcement background and the medical background, I can go in and do medical and executive protection. Sometimes I just do executive protections for teams that I enjoy working with. Uh, and but there's a lot of spaces that this is, my bread and butter is emergency medicine. Okay. This is also just, a side business that I do. I spend a lot of time on it, but it's a side business that I do where I don't want to expand my business more than what I can kind of handle. Because I don't want to get into having to manage 100 people doing RST at different, locations. I'd rather just focus on the medical. I don't want to get into the business of a PPO and that whole business. I have no desire to do it. I'm busy enough. I've got, two young kids that I raise. I've got ER shifts. I do enough kind of personal EP work on the side. And then, in terms of managing, medical directing, XPJ, it's just a ton on my plate. I could expand the business. I just don't feel like I'm ready to expand it right now. I mean, there's room to grow. I'm content where I'm at. I love the groups that I work with right now. I just want to focus on that. And then I think with time, probably in the next couple of years, I may expand it, where I'm going to bring on, more docs, maybe, medical managers, full time with the organization. But that's, I think, in the future in a little bit.
I mean, I could see this emerging over the last couple of years when you started to see a number of both attempts and assassinations of high profile political, non-political people,
Hmm.
the CEO of United Healthcare, Charlie Kirk, you know, um, it has become a real wild, wild west in terms of, the level of protection that's needed, good protection, and then the necessity for not only proper medicine, but the ability to, get off the X and be able to do
Hmm.
medicine on the move. Um, those are all key components to really, I think, is an effective EP organization It sounds like that's what you guys are doing. I understood that, and you mentioned it at the onset. Are you affiliated at all with NASCAR?
Yeah, so I used to do NASCAR as a resident. So Jeff Grange was the med director for and the ambulance provider for the auto. Geez, what was it called? Maybe it was called Auto Club Speedway or California Speedway 25 years ago. So on Fontana, they have a 2 mile oval track where NASCAR would come in. And so I would work the track as the track doc, or I would work in the infield care center when I was a resident, provide care for the drivers. NASCAR has a protocol where if you get in any wreck, you have to come in and be seen in the infield care center. So I've done that for multiple years, but now NASCAR is basically going to tear down the track. I think the last race was a couple years ago. So that's no longer. I think the plan is to rebuild a 1/4 mile track or a 1/2 mile track. But I'm not sure. But I've done NASCAR, Indy racing. I mean, with the sheriff's department, we would support. We have a big outdoor amphitheater in San Bernardino. I mean, raves, Ozfest. I mean, I've been involved in, I mean, I remember a riot one year when I was working on the sheriff helicopter where it was a complete utter riot. I mean, tear gas, OC spray, everything was deployed. I mean, we were being attacked. We were, on the offensive. I mean, we were making arrests left and right. Helicopter was coming down, doing flyovers, 100 feet off the deck. I mean, just trying to disperse crowds. That ended up backfiring because it just seemed to kind of incite the folks,
Yeah.
it incited them more. Every time they flew by, they were like, yeah, and just
Sure.
yeah. I mean, that was a wild night. I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, I've done a lot in a medical role that was more law enforcement, on some of these events, but I mean, absolutely great experiences, the ability to go backstage, to have kind of all access, to just be able to walk where you want to walk as a medical team. I mean, they want you there. I mean, it's been a great experience.
Do you, as a reserve officer, do you feel like you have more access, or let's just say more piss power when you're operating in an EP role, or just in general conversations with people? Does it seem to give you a little more cred?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if it gives me more cred, but I do think my law enforcement background is what got me into the EP world. The world works in mysterious ways. I mean, I'm just sitting in my office, my buddy comes in, and because he knows of my law enforcement background and obviously the emergency medicine background, I'm the perfect fit for the guy that they're looking for, in Northern Cal for med direction, because I've got that law enforcement. Now, does it give me any more powers or anything? No. I mean, we still operate under a civilian civilian world when you're working in that corporate or high net worth client. But I think when other folks know I'm in law enforcement, I mean, it does give you a little more cred, but in terms of what you can actually legally do, obviously it doesn't give you any. But I mean, yeah, in the sense that, hey, listen, he's kind of one of us on the law enforcement. I mean, because in executive protection, there's a lot of retired law enforcement, right? It's either street level cops or retired Secret Service. I mean, I've worked with, countless Secret Service retirees in the industry that become chief security officers or work EP, FBI, retirees that come in, big corporate CSOs or, high level security folks for these large corporations up in the Silicon Valley. So, and obviously they're getting those jobs because of their connections, their law enforcement pedigree. So yeah, I mean, I guess the simple answer is yes, but there's limits to it.
Well, I mean, you should. There's nothing wrong with it. That's for sure. I believe
Yeah,
me.
no, it didn't hinder me. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's it, no one handed you a badge. You earned the badge, and no one
Oh yeah.
handed you the experience that went along with that badge. You earned that as well, and so it makes you a trusted person, certainly right out of the chute. And you, in some ways, speak the language. That's an important element in many ways. Which is like kind of my next question leads to. Do you foresee? And I know we talked about this earlier. A time when the EP world and the inclusion of medicine will become much more legislated or regulated in this state or even nationwide?
Um,
Is there a need for it?
I think there's a need for legislation because, our typical EMS system, the way it works, especially in California, which is, I would say, overly regulated. You get the state, right? Then you get these counties or these local county areas that are regulated by a different local EMS agency, or what we refer to as a LEMSA. And each county has its own rules. San Bernardino County may be able to use ketamine for pain. Then you get into LA County, which, if you're working on the border, you just cross over city lines and you're in LA County, and you're no longer, those medics based out of LA County may or not be able to use Dilaudid or ketamine or this type of airway or that airway. The good thing about that is if you're in this area and you're allowed to use ketamine, but you have to transport to the trauma center, which is, in this county, then you're able to use your home-based protocols. For EP, it's different because we may be moving from one county for 4 days and working in a county. And we may be on a private jet with the client to Montana for a week. And then from there to Miami for a couple of days for a meeting, a conference, or what have you. And there's no legislation for that. There's an EMS compact now that makes it a little easier for certain state medics or certain state, I don't even know if it applies to EMTs, where you can kind of get easily co-licensed in multiple states. I mean, me, myself, I've got a medical license here in California, in Nevada, in Florida, in Ohio, just because of some of my work and where it's at. But it's not easy for a medic to kind of get multi-state licenses. They've got to be attached to an EMS agency. It just makes it a lot harder.
Which is, to me is like part of the big rub, decades ago. And fortunately, when I first started, it wasn't present at the time. But this notion of national registration of both EMTs and paramedics, having to pass a national registry exam that says I know what the drugs are here in California and in New York and everywhere else, and I'll never use them, But then if someone from New York said I'm going to move to California, it's not just come in and say, okay, I'm here. You and I both understand what the process and the mother may eyes and we'll just say what it is, the money grab that is associated with accreditation and licensing in both a state and a LEMSA. And so, yeah, it's really screwy. And again, it's both regional and within a state and national. And then, of course, if you're traveling internationally, I don't even know how that shakes out. I mean, do you have any idea of what happens if you travel to Europe?
Yeah, I mean, so we use a lot of local assets when we travel because I don't know the system in France compared to Spain. So we've got partners that are medics that work, in those local, and in Europe is different, right? I mean, you're moving country to country, but to be honest with you, it's almost relative. Like me going from California to Nevada would be the same as me going from one country to the other in Europe. I mean, you could be in 5 different countries in, in a day's travel or on a train ride. So we do use local assets, just to cover our bases. So we know that the areas, I mean, obviously we do advances and we know where the hospitals are and we know kind of the equivalent to the trauma centers in Europe versus here, or going to Africa or wherever we're going. A lot of times we're in the Caribbean, on the islands, St. Bart's, and I mean, we're all over the place. But yeah, I mean, the system is not, it's not built for that. I mean, it's easier when you're on a yacht, on a boat, when family wants to be on a boat. Captain is, king and emperor of the ship. And, it's a little easier to do medicine. But once you hit the shore, I mean, we've had issues, if on the yacht there's narcotics, we don't dare take narcotics to the mainland. We just don't, because you don't want to get wrangled up by, local police, or, have your medic arrested for carrying narcotics.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, our typical EMS system is not structured for EP medicine. And so there's times we work in the gray, there's times where, there's extra cost to bring on local assets to, support us. And yeah, I mean, I think there will be a time where, and it's probably going to be in the far future, because there's going to have to be, an EP medical lobby group that's going to go in and lobby it. And you're going to get people that are going to fight back. You're going to get local EMS that don't want you in their neighborhood. They want you to use them. I mean,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
already see the political, just complete nonsense that would happen when this, were to go to legislation.
Well, I'll tell you a short story. When I was on the governor's detail, we traveled internationally to a South American country, and going in and coming out, even though it was all prearranged, we were bringing weapons and narcs and medical gear. We had to give them to them before we deplaned, and then we had to buy them back once we got into the airport. And then when we left, we had to give up all of our weapons. And I remember, having to give up, my monitor and defibrillator and my all my narcs, and then having to buy them back. It was just crazy, weird shit
Yeah.
that you experience once you leave. If you think either California or the United States can get a little hokey, travel abroad, and things can get a little strange. You mentioned something about advances. How important is it for that person who is the medical component to an EP team to be a part of the ops plan and the briefing for the team?
Oh, I mean, it's one and the same, because on the medical side, there's advances we need to do. I mean, there's the same thing on the ops side, where they're looking at traffic and where we're going and how we're going to move. It's the same for me. I mean, I have to, and our teams have to. What hospitals are we going to? What urgent cares do we have? Do we have a back way in? Do we have connections at so-and-so hospital? Which one's the trauma center? Which one's the pediatric center? Which one's the burn? Which one's the stroke? And you can't just do it online, because if a website's not up to date and they're no longer a trauma center, but their IT guy didn't fix that on the website, you got to make a phone call. You got to make contacts. The best person to talk to is a charge nurse in the ER, and it may or may not be the same charge nurse that you're going to see 3 days later if you end up being there, but at least someone knows you. Hey, I talked to so-and-so charge nurse. We'd already had this set up. Because I'll tell you now, if I show up into an ER, I don't want to talk to the doc. The doc don't want to talk to me, and I don't want to talk to the doc. The charge nurse is going to be a lot of people don't know that. They just think, hey, just talk to the doc. Doc don't want nothing to do with you. He's going to do what the charge nurse says, unless you know that doc on a personal basis and you can make a phone call. Hey, can you make this happen for me? It'll be the charge nurses. It'll be the nurses. It'll be the front desk crew. It'll be that person that's going to, security. Security's big when you're doing advance. And like, hey, listen, we may be coming, we may not, with guns, without. Is there a back way? This is, LA, I do a Cedar Sinai. They've got their own special thing that they do for people that are, because they don't, for known celebrities, let's say, because they don't want to get caught.
I would do that with the governor. They say, this is
Yep.
the room we're bringing him to. This is who you're going to be going to. And but whether you have a governor or a high profile, high value, I think it's important, and I think you're driving this home, is that, like, you do your homework and you make sure that you, if at all possible, again, whatever it takes, because really a lot of times it's wheeling and dealing,
Yeah.
to get what you need and want, from these facilities. And then I would drive the routes to them, because you can't rely on Google or in fact that, a map or anything, and then have an alternative route just in case, something has gone wrong. There's a traffic collision or there's construction that wasn't there the day you drove the route. It's a lot of work. And
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's important to us as an organization, and it's also important to that hospital, because if you're going to bring in a high profile person, or there's a possibility, or there's a big event, they don't want to get caught with their pants down either. I mean, a lot of these hospitals have had issues with high profile patients coming in and people accessing charts, and, it becomes a big mess for them, medical legally. When people are opening up charts that don't need to open it, are we going to come in as a John Doe or a Jane Doe, or are we going to have an alias? Are we not going to have an alias? Are they going to use their real name? Because look, even the media wants in on the hospital and they don't care. They're not under HIPAA or anything. They don't care if they can get access or get some pictures, or, the hospital doesn't want that. They don't want that notoriety that they're the hospital that allowed their patients to have pictures taken because they didn't give them an access that, we're not coming through the main lobby. I mean, sometimes we have to. Um, so,
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
They
It's
want a heads up as well.
which I kind of feel like, when you're talking about the stuff the work that you do, more specifically from the medical side, and when you integrate it into, we'll just say a reputable EP organization, that's really how you get effective, service, and the biggest bang for that client's buck in terms of security, as well as the provision of medicine should that be necessary. But it's not a small item. It's a and I sometimes I feel like, maybe at the lower ends, people are looking to do it on the cheap, and you can't do that. I mean, you can, but now you're just gambling. It's all risk management at that
Yeah,
point.
it's just risk management. I think
Yeah.
I think why medicine is not as integral into kind of EP now, or is integrated, is because of cost, and because I think their risk tolerance is they just think, hey, we'll just call 911. And I know the 911 system now is beat up. Depending on what area you're at, what area you're in, response times could be delayed, transport times could be delayed. You've got a lot of agencies that don't have their own ambulances, fire agencies that may be first responding. They're waiting on a third party ambulance to come to transport. I mean, I know that system well, and I know it's not, if you think you're going to call 911 and someone's showing up in a couple minutes, it's not going to happen.
unless they just happen to be there. The and which kind of goes to the point that much of this is all based, like a lot of things, on not proactive but reactive. Something has to happen. I always say, and it's probably in a morbid sense, someone has to die in order for something to change. And even to that end, it has to be someone important. Like, and as an example, Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and within 24 hours, my company received 2 phone calls from 2 different sheriff's departments to send a team in that they were just decided that they were going to develop. They wanted to stand up an EP group for their sheriff. But had they ever thought of that before? I don't know. I mean, maybe someone said we should, but it took an event for them to say this. And I said, well, we're going to teach you medicine as well. So, plan on this, to whatever degree, we're teaching TECC. But that's just, unfortunately, that's kind of the state of, of how things are. But I think it takes solid organizations that stand up a good product and a good service before it becomes an industry standard, and cost is always a factor in everything. I mean, that's the cost of doing business, you know.
And I can almost guarantee you those 2 sheriff offices, it wasn't even probably the sheriff that wanted it. It's probably someone else, beneath them, or maybe board of directors or something like that, that's saying, hey, no, we need to protect you. Because once you're in that position of power, you don't want to be seen as, having an EP personnel around you. So it may just be that this is just now mandated by, whoever is mandating it as a political figure. Now, if you're a sheriff, you're a political figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of times it's not the principal or the sheriff or, the CEO that wants it. It's the board of directors. It's because they understand, hey, listen, if you're the CEO of this, take Elon Musk, for example. If something happens to Elon Musk, his Tesla, his SpaceX, I mean, a lot of that market cap is based
Yeah.
on Elon Musk and
Yeah.
his ability to, just think and to make things happen, to dream, to continue to kind of go forward. There's not another Elon Musk out there.
Right.
When
You're
when
absolutely
Steve
correct.
when Steve Jobs passed away, from cancer, the founder of Apple, you know, a lot of people thought Apple was going to just go down in flames. And obviously that wasn't an EP related death, but a lot of value for companies is based on who that CEO or that founder is. And if something happens to him or her, then it becomes an issue for the business. I mean, look at what happened to United Healthcare. I mean, that company basically dropped half its market cap, and then that death kind of led into all kinds of now legal issues for like why did it happen? What's going on with these healthcare companies denying claims, and now you've got this guy that's lost his mind shooting him for whatever reason, and then it just opens you up into a whole new can of worms. And I believe that CEO actually had a security detail, but just had ditched him or just didn't need him that day, or they didn't travel. So I mean, there's a reason why you have a detail. You need to have them with you. When you're walking the streets of New York, you need to have them with you. You're going to get a cup of coffee or starting your day off early. They need to be with you. I mean, and the reality is with that incident, I mean, it doesn't sound like the first shot was the kill shot. It sounded like the second shot was the kill shot. So if you had someone with you, even though there may not know medical, if they were able to stop the assailant or take him down, that second kill shot wouldn't have happened.
Correct. You know,
So
in all of my EP training, and I've had quite a bit, the the one the one statement that has always echoed in my mind since receiving that training is basically what you just said. But what they said to us was this: the shooter always gets the first shot. It's what you do after that first shot that will determine whether your principal will survive or whether you're able to mitigate that threat to any degree. They always get the first shot. And I mean, historically, when you look at assassination attempts and assassinations, uh, it wasn't like protectors were able to get a first shot off. It's someone walked up, which is, tells me that when you're operating in a small team, 2-man, 3-man, which is pretty much what I see within the general EP world. I mean, I come from a detail where, our walking movement was, 6 strong, just the walking movement. And that's not including everyone who's been pre-posted and otherwise. And we still felt vulnerable, and so, but, when you have all of these things in place, including the notion of medicine, then you reduce the risk. And as much as your principal or whomever doesn't want all that attention, they are the face of the company, or they are, in some instances, the face of the state. In my instance, and so you've got to, I'm not protecting the person, I'm protecting the office. And that's exactly how you have to look at it. But yeah, interesting. And so, as this whole thing evolves, I think you're going to find yourself more busy. you
yeah,
know,
I mean, it's already busy. I mean, I say no to a lot of stuff. I get requests for training all the time, and I have to kind of my time is I hate to say it, it sounds like I'm super important, but I've got a busy life with kids and school, and I mean, I've made it my personal dedication to my kids. They're young, and I want to be around as much as possible until they get to that teenage year where they don't want me around, and then I can kind of venture off and do more. But that's what's important to me. I mean, I could work 365 days a year if I needed to, and I just have no desire to do that. I want to be around for these kids. I want to drop them off to school. I want to pick them up from school. I want to go to their soccer games and their baseball games and their, cheer camp and all that stuff. So that's what's important to me. I mean, I had kids late, and this is I had a lot of fun when I was, you know, prior to kids, and this is my fun now, and I can sprinkle in some days of work, big events, and just live my life. I'm not chasing money. I tell people all the time, I go, I just don't have time for it right now. And I can find you someone, to do this training that I trust in, and I think will give you great training. I just don't, I just can't do it right now, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. So I've learned to say no a lot. I used to never say no, but I've learned to start to say no a lot.
Well, fortunately, in my position now, I'm able to, create my own little C-suite, and a lot of what Lawrence used to do, Dr. High School used to do, um, I don't do, because you can become more efficient, and be the thinker and the face of the company when you have other people doing the work. And I imagine, at some point, if you're not already doing that, you'll do that now. At the same time, there are a number of people I always look at, you now being one of them. I think, man, how does that guy find the 25th hour of the day? Because it, it just seems like you're able to do a lot and squeeze a lot out of a day. But it's organization, and it's everything else that goes along with it that makes it happen. Um, Michael, is there, as we wrap up here, is there anything that you'd like to add, and maybe anything that we missed that you want to kind of bring up?
No, I mean, we've had a great conversation. I mean, I just
Yeah.
think, the folks that are going to be watching this, I know you've got a large law enforcement following. I mean, I get messages from law enforcement all the time that are maybe a year, a couple years out of retiring, and they want to kind of double dip and get in maybe to EP because it just suits them well. I mean, I would say what you guys do at ISTM in terms of EP training. I'm going to have to probably come up and see you guys up in Sacramento sooner or later when I get some time, and check out, the
Yeah.
training now, how it compared to 20 years ago, sitting in the Palm Springs police station, doing the training
I've
then.
been there. I've been there.
Yeah.
That's where I took it.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think listen, I mean, I think EP is a great gig. It's fun. You get to see a lot of things. You get, you know, a lot of access to things that you may have never done in your law enforcement career. I do see a time where medical folks are going to get cross trained into EP and start doing EP medicine. I mean, uh, depending on the team you're working with, I mean, there's lots of great teams out there, lots of travel, lots of thinking. And I think, you're going to see a lot of crossover from EP into medicine, and probably more medicine into EP, which is probably not great for our EMS system because we're drowning right now with personnel issues and things. But that's something the EMS system is going to have to fix. I mean, if folks want to leave EMS to get into EP, it tells us something about how we're treating our EMS folks out there, and how we're treating our law enforcement folks out there. If they're leaving law enforcement and EMS, or hell, even me. I mean, I'm leaving medicine, to do medicine somewhere else. I mean,
So
how we're treating
I
our
was just going to
folks.
bring that up. I'm like, wait a second. You're a good example of things that are happening in one career field that I don't think you're abandoning medicine, but I mean, I think there's a clear nexus to what you have done over your career, and what you're doing now. So it's not like you're changing horses per se. You're just kind of still operating on the same horse, but it maybe
Yeah.
goes in a different direction.
I'm
Yeah.
just providing my medicine in austere environments or non-hospital based corporate kind of oversight medicine where, I do things that are imposed by, corporations, or, some weird guideline that I have to follow. And I'm done with that. Like I'm completely done with that. I want to practice medicine the way I want to practice medicine. I want to do it with people that I enjoy being around, not just some weird administrator that's telling me I have to do this or I have to do that, or I have a patient complaint because I didn't give enough Dilaudid, or whatever, and I just don't want to play that game anymore. I've been
Sure.
doing emergency medicine for, I don't know, 24, 25 years, and I've seen it change. I mean, it's primary care medicine now. It's homeless medicine where people abuse the system, where they just lay in a bed for, a day and a half or 2 days, refusing to leave, or they want a voucher for this and they want a hotel room. And, it's become, social, social services and not emergency medicine anymore.
Right.
So
Right. I think you made it. You hit the nail on the head when you said it's now primary care medicine.
yeah, I mean, it is.
Sadly, that's why I stay away from an ER. I mean, I've got to really need it in order
Yeah.
to go to it.
Yeah,
Because
and it's not the patient's fault. It's the system is
that's
so
correct.
broken. You
Yeah.
know, primary care leaving left and right. People aren't staying in medicine like they did 30, 40 years ago when they had autonomy, where they could actually spend time with patients. They knew their patients. Patients didn't go from one insurance to another insurance based on, you know, where they worked or whatever was the lowest rate for whatever corporation that they're working for. You know, always a panel of patients you don't know. um Medicine has completely changed, and you know, I think until physicians kind of take medicine back from these corporations, it's going to continue to get worse. And you know, I'm lucky. I have a skill set that a lot of physicians don't have, and you know, I found a new home and I enjoy it. I mean, I was telling you previous to getting on camera that, you know, I just finished Comic-Con for 3 or 4 days. I saw a lot of guys on different details, just kind of, you know, crossing paths that I've seen in other areas. And I worked with a crew of 5 guys and a team, a PR team, and, you know, clients that, I mean, it was a blast. I loved it. I mean, I'll never tell them, and they're going to know now, but I've already told a buddy of mine that I work for, I would do this stuff for free because I actually enjoy it. It's fun, you know, to be in charge of a cast of a TV show, or, you know, cast of a movie, and move from hotel to hotel to convention center, do press line, you know, to have people rely on you for, you know, their safety and making sure that, you know, we've got good movement, and have, you know, our PR folks and our travel folks getting cars ready for us and getting everything smooth, working with, you know, convention center and hotel security, and having those connections. And I mean, it's just fun, right? It's just better than going patient to patient room, patient room, patient room, seeing the same thing over and over again. I mean, it's just more stimulating. I mean, you would think EP is more mentally stimulating to me now than emergency medicine is. It really is.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I've done emergency medicine for 25 years. How many chest pains can you see in a day?
Yeah. No,
It's
you're
the
right.
same old
You're
story,
right.
right? It's how
You're
many
right.
abdominal pains can you see? How many intubations can you do? But, you
Yeah.
know, working
Yeah.
with a cast of folks, and having to work with PR, and you're on your phone and setting up travel, and we're going
Yeah.
here and who's receiving me, and like you're
Yeah.
busy. And I mean, I did a 15-hour day that felt like a couple hours, you know,
That's
and I've
amazing.
done 10-hour shifts that felt like an eternity, you know?
I hear that too. I'm
So
familiar with that concept. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. Is there contact information? How does someone get a hold of you if they?
yeah, I think the best way for me is LinkedIn. Michael Guirguis, MD, I think it is, or Michael Guirguis. I'm there. And on that, I have a link tree. I mean, I've got a link tree of podcasts I've done, all executive protection article. I mean, there's probably 40 different items on there between podcast articles, papers I've written with some folks from um, disaster medicine fellowship out of Harvard. I think that's, if you can find me on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram and all this other stuff, but I think LinkedIn is my home. Instagram is for when I'm bored and I want to doom scroll and look up stuff. But yeah, everything is on my link tree. I can send you my link tree. Maybe you can put it in the podcast notes. But yeah, if you find me on LinkedIn, you'll see my link tree. You could see anything and everything EP medical podcasts that I've done similar to this. And I think that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Very good. Well, listen, again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a fantastic conversation on my end. Um, I think that there's a lot to be learned from this whole thing, and I think you're gonna do real well in your next career, your new next career, and
Yeah,
as
I
you
appreciate
transition
it.
out of your old one. For our listeners today, thank you so much for being with us. And I think if you are in law enforcement, if you've been involved in EMS, and if you're especially involved in EP, executive protection, or anything in that realm, you will have gotten a tremendous amount of information from today's episode and speaking with Dr. Guirguis, and understanding exactly what it takes to operate in this type of environment, and not only providing safe security for a principal or a client, but as well providing some level of solid medical care, both from a medicine standpoint and a trauma standpoint. So again, we're glad you joined us. If you enjoyed this podcast, if you enjoyed this episode, we hope that you take the time to like, comment, or even share this podcast. And certainly we would really appreciate if you subscribe to this podcast. It gives us an opportunity to better understand what it is that we're doing right or wrong. And then it will help us to broaden our listenership, our viewership, so that we can continue to bring you the type of content that you may enjoy. Again, until we see you at our next episode, stay safe.